All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Meredith, you can take it away.
Okay, am I on? Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you.
Excellent. Because I want to point out that just over my left shoulder is the 1896 charter for St. Luke's Chapel. It was signed on October 17th, which is the eve of St. Luke's Day. As the chapel was declared to be at the time, it would be separated henceforth from all unhallowed, worldly, and common uses. A lot of florid explanation follows about its worship value as a space, but that only amplifies how extraordinary that little phrase there is for a chapel that is smack dab in the middle of a hospital. The distinction, to me at least, is clear and is clearly supporting the idea that healing of bodies is hallowed, that it is, yes, but not of the world. And that is by dint of its uncommon reach, that uncommon reach of medical aspirations, which are sometimes divine. Understanding the mission in this way was not unprecedented. In fact, that had been the vision of Muhlenberg 23 years earlier when the hospital was founded. But on this 174th anniversary of our founding, I, as one of the hospital's chaplains, am going to shamelessly capitalize on the language of that charter in order to extol the fidelity of this place, now called Morningside, to the founder's vision. In its 174 years, it has stepped across the threshold of 2 centuries. It has ministered through a civil war, 2 world wars, sundry conflicts, 1 Great Depression, and 3 great epidemics. And it has done so without becoming cynical. It has not elevated profit above the needs of the community it serves. And this is an enormous claim to be able to make. And we can. That said, I'm going to turn this over to our president, Art Gianelli, who understands better than anyone how we keep doing this.
Well, thank you, Meredith. And I'm not sure that I understand it better than everyone here, but I give it my best shot. So I want to thank you, Meredith, Norma, obviously, Michaela, Audrey, Catherine, and everybody who has worked to produce this remarkable event that celebrates the history of this hospital. It's a history that needs to be remembered, must be honored, and really deserves the recognition that we give it on an annual basis. So thank you. You know, believe it or not, earlier this year, we changed the name of Mount Sinai St. Luke's to Mount Sinai Morningside. It's hard to believe that it was just this year that we did that. We've been through a few things since the name change occurred. But it's important to note that the change in the name says nothing about the importance of our commitment and fidelity, to use Meredith's wonderful word, to the legacy of Muhlenberg, to the aspirations that he had for this hospital, that we have a compassionate approach to care, that we are committed to clinical discovery and to clinical excellence, and that we believe that we are all entitled to the best possible care, regardless of our circumstances in life. We remain committed to those goals as stewards of the legacy of Muhlenberg, of the legacy of St. Luke's, and of this hospital, now Mount Sinai Morningside. St. Luke's and now Mount Sinai Morningside has endured so many changes over the years. We've endured wars, we've endured tragedies and triumphs, and we've endured disease on more than one occasion, and clearly we are enduring that now. The response of this hospital and the people that work within its walls to the COVID-19 pandemic has been nothing short of extraordinary. The courage of our caregivers and the stories of their bravery and their determination, and frankly, their humanness in the context of the unknown of the disease and its relentlessness when we were at the peak of the pandemic, a peak that we hope never again to see. These stories really are, again, really remarkable, singular, and they're stories of that vindicate the legacy of this hospital, that vindicate its history, and they're stories that are going to be told, I think, for the next 174 years. You know, to make the connection between what we do today and the legacy of our founders, we're here to announce something special today. And that is that we want to change the name of the President's Award. The President's Award is an award that we give to members of our team who've done really extraordinary work and are being recognized for that work by their peers, and who do work consistent with the values of our hospital and our health system. We want to change the name of that award from the President's Award to the Muhlenberg Award. And the reason we want to do that is that by renaming the award in honor of the founder of this hospital, we create that bridge from where we are today to where we've been. We create that bridge from the founding ethos of St. Luke's to the work that we do each and every day here at Mount Sinai Morningside. And we engage the memory of our past in the work that we do each and every day from now going forward. So I think it's really important that we make that connection and that we make this name change in honor of the founder of this hospital. And of course, there's no better day to do it than on Founders Day. So I'm proud to make that announcement, and we certainly will make that known, and that will be the award's name on a going forward basis when we reconvene, albeit virtually probably early next year, to continue that very well received program. So I'm very happy to make that announcement. And I think last, I'd like to say this, that, you know, it's sort of interesting in healthcare today. There's so much of a movement towards systemness, of creating out of many one. And some health systems do this very well, and some health systems maybe not so much. I'd like to think that the Mount Sinai Health System is doing this well, because what the Mount Sinai Health System does, I believe, is we build the system where it's appropriate to build the system, but we recognize the strength that each of our respective hospitals brings to the health system. The health system is stronger because of each of its component parts. And this health system, the Mount Sinai Health System, is certainly stronger because it includes Mount Sinai Morningside, formerly Mount Sinai St. Luke's, formerly St. Luke's Hospital. And the reason for that, in the end, is the vision of its founder, the character of its staff, its commitment to its values, and its belief that everybody in the end is a child of God who deserves the dignity of the best possible care, regardless of their circumstance in life. I'm proud to lead a hospital with that vision, with this staff, and with those principles. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Meredith.
And with that, I will introduce the indefatigable archivist of Mount Sinai Morningside, Dr. Norma Braun, and Michaela Biondi, the Associate Archivist, Mount Sinai Morningside and Mount Sinai West. recollections.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it, and we are so happy to have our leader, Mr. Gianelli, be our leader who understands our history and can share it with us in such eloquent words for taking us to the future. I'm not going to take a lot of time here to make remarks because both Michaela and I will be available for any questions. But I'd like Meredith to go ahead and show this small video, which is extracted from our 150th anniversary, created by Dr. Nancy Piniella, who is our former archivist who's now retired. And thanks to Miles Glenn, who used to be our AD person, who's a lovely helper, helped me extract it so that we have a short part of it, and then moving on to the future. So Audrey, take it away.
New York City, the great melting pot. More than 7 million people of every race, creed, color, and national origin. People whose forefathers saw the city as the gateway to freedom, the ticket to a better life in a place called America. The arrival of each immigrant meant a new face, another worker, and one more person to care for. In November of 1871, the Reverend William Augustus Muhlenberg, who founded St. Luke's Hospital 25 years earlier at 54th Street, climbed into his carriage and headed uptown. St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center is the community's only full-service healthcare provider. And while the technology is state-of-the-art, the challenge remains timeless. By the late 1890s, charity patients accounted for more than 70% of the whole number treated at St. Luke's. Under increasing pressure to meet the needs of a growing community and with no room to expand on Fifth Avenue, the hospital's board of managers decided to build a larger and better equipped facility farther uptown. On January 24, 1896, St. Luke's officially moved to 113th Street and Morningside Drive. By all accounts, the new facility was magnificent. Designed by the daring young architect Ernest Flagg, the new St. Luke's was patterned after the Luxembourg Palace in Paris. With its pavilions, block tower, and dome, it reflected the classical palace hospitals of the 17th century. In keeping with the spirit of its founder, the hospital's chapel made a striking first impression. Its architectural grandeur and picturesque location made St. Luke's an ideal place to get well. By the turn of the century, New York was booming. Commerce and industry were growing at an unprecedented rate. Immigration levels were at an all-time high, and the city began to expand uptown. Francis Carter Wood, a surgeon and pathologist at St. Luke's, pioneered diagnostic applications of X-rays and would later gain international fame for his research in the field of cancer. Upon the entry of America into World War I, both St. Luke's and Roosevelt were called upon to provide a service that had come to distinguish them in past conflicts. More than 100 doctors from among St. Luke's alumni and 200 graduates of the School of Nursing were enrolled in the various services during the war. When the stock market crashed in 1929, America plunged into the Great Depression. Despite the crisis, St. Luke's and Roosevelt never wavered in their devotion to the West Side community. In 1934, an efficiency expert who surveyed St. Luke's Hospital reported, "St. Luke's is perhaps the outstanding institution in the city. There is an atmosphere of charity, faith, and humane consideration for suffering which is admirable and unsurpassed elsewhere. In 1941, America found itself at war again and called upon the nation's hospitals to come to the aid of its troops overseas. From 1942 through 1945, St. Luke's and Roosevelt Hospital physicians and nurses treated more than 60,000 patients with a success never before attained in the care of battle casualties. After the war, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, like the rest of America, went back to work. The baby boom was in full swing, and the community was once again growing rapidly. Meanwhile, St. Luke's was busy expanding its service to the community by incorporating New York's renowned Women's Hospital as its women's division. By the time the 1970s rolled around, New York and the Upper West Side had changed even more than Reverend Muhlenberg could have imagined. Today, as in the past, St. Luke's Roosevelt depends on a long list of benefactors. Names such as Vanderbilt, Morgan, and Hearst have been joined by Smithers, Miller, Doubleday, Babcock, Abo, and many others. Their generosity enables the hospital center to carry on its important mission. As Reverend Muhlenberg said upon realizing his dream 150 years ago, "Blessed be God for this good and happy day. The seed is planted, and I trust by the hand of him who will not let it die."
Now you can see that this is our very brief history, and the full YouTube, for including Roosevelt, is available on the archivist site. At any rate, we are happy now to introduce Dr. Erna Kojic, who is our Director of Infectious Disease in the Department of Medicine. I will not spend a lot of time because I want to give her more time to just tell you she has an illustrious history, having come from Iceland and trained there, did double duty residency, not only in Iceland, and repeated it in America. She was at Brown University and she did a fellowship in research in HIV. She started the first HIV clinic for women with HIV in menopause, or a separate category. But at any rate, she, rather than go further, I want her to talk about our topic for today, which is to understand a little bit about the pandemics, its impact on all of us is still going on today. Thank you, Dr. Kojic, for doing this wonderful talk. We're looking forward to it.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Norma, and organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk about these pandemics today. So I'm going to start off by giving a little bit of a background about these viruses, only to gain a better understanding of where we're coming from with the nomenclature of them. As you know, both of those viruses that caused the pandemic of 1918 and 2020, they are RNA viruses of these families that are depicted there on the slide. And on the left-hand side, you will see the influenza virus. And influenza A and B are the ones that cause human demise. And they are subtyped based on the properties of the two surface proteins that we call hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And all of the names of the subsequent viruses that affect us every year and cause pandemics, of note, only influenza A causes pandemics, are based on these hemagglutinin and neuraminidase, and therefore they're called influenza H something and something, And the pandemic of 1918 happened to be caused by a new virus, which was first identified at that time called influenza H1N1, or the Spanish flu. Moving over to your right-hand side, this coronaviruses, similarly an RNA virus. And the prior coronaviruses that we knew of, the first 4 of them that were just named by numbers, they cause about 30% of the common cold. And then back in 2002, we identified a new coronavirus, or the SARS-CoV coronavirus 1, followed by Middle Eastern coronavirus in 2012. And then in December in Wuhan was identified a new one, a novel virus, SARS coronavirus 2, which is the causative agent of the current pandemic that we are living through. Now, all of these viruses, they gain viral entry by binding to human receptors. And in the coronavirus, it is the spike protein that binds, and in the influenza virus, it's the hemagglutinin virus. So I'm just going to mention a little bit. We call it the Spanish flu. It's also been called the mother of all pandemics, and also the forgotten pandemic, because we certainly didn't know much about it over the last recent year until the emergence of this current pandemic. This virus actually did not originate in Spain. Actually, back in 1918, as you know, the World War I was still going on strong, and the Allied and Central Powers actually limited all reporting or any added human loss that was not associated with the war. Spain, however, being a neutral country, its newspapers were not subject to wartime censorship, being a neutral country. So therefore, they started reporting on the added death from this new respiratory, what they thought was a virus. And therefore, the name came the Spanish flu. So it's not because it originated, it probably originated in Germany and Britain at the time. Next slide. So I'm going to start off a little bit by the similarities. These are 2 images on the left from 1918 and from 2020. As you can see, we are dealing with endless rows of patients in bed. Back in 1918, they had little else than just masks and supportive care. In fact, some of the hospitals were just called resting places for these patients. Whereas today's day and age, we have a lot of modern technology to assist us in keeping patients better, aiding their pulmonary recovery and so on and so forth. But in both of these pandemics, the flu H1N1 was a novel virus back in 1918. COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 was a novel virus this time around. Both of them originated or are zoonotic, have a zoonotic origin. H1N1 from birds and then from pigs likely, and the COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 likely from bats. They have nearly identical symptoms and also modes of transmission, as far as we know. And it's interesting in reading back to the description of 1918, it's almost the identical presentation or clinical presentation, and it looks like what we now know as being a cytokine storm, where there's a surge of immune cells and they're activating cytokines that lead to the inflammatory respiratory distress. The same thing happened back in 1918. Both of these viruses spread fast, giving them assigning them as a pandemic. Back in 19, the spread was possibly aided by the World War I and the soldier mobilization, which actually created an ideal situation for influenza dispersal. And today, we obviously live in an interconnected world. Somebody mentioned that the world map has been crumpled. It's so easy to get from one end of the world to another. And that also aids in the fast spread of the corona or the SARS-CoV-2. Nursing in both of these epidemic, nursing has been a major part of the public health responses. And we actually, another striking similarity between the 2 pandemics is the preventive measures that were undertaken. Next slide. So preventive measures of 1918, these are 2 pictures showing that. As you can see, back they recommended that you stay away from public transportation, stay rested, stay away from people that cough, don't take a taxi, walk to work, and so on and so forth. Stay home if you can. And on the right-hand side, if you look at the list there, it's strikingly similar to what we are recommending today. Again, you know, keep your mouth and teeth clean. Don't take any other person's breath. Avoid people that cough and sneeze. Don't go into poorly ventilated places, so on and so forth. The one thing that we did not add to our ones is avoid worry, fear, and fatigue. But otherwise, they're recommending masks and social distancing, just worded differently. We have modern terminology today. Next slide. And as you can see, it's the same exact recommendations that we had back in 1918. Wash your hands or don't share cups. Avoid close contact, stay away from people that are coughing, wear masks, cover your sneeze, and clean and disinfect often. So stay clean. I want to just briefly act on, to mention the therapies that we use. Obviously, novel viruses, we had no treatments then, we had no treatment now for SARS-CoV-2. So we used what we thought would work. And back in 1918, they had aspirin. So it had been marketed by Bayer in 1899, but its patent happened to expire in 1917. So therefore, anybody could manufacture it in big bulks, and that's exactly what happened. And at the time, medical professionals recognizing that aspirin can limit the inflammatory responses, they were actually recommending tremendous doses of aspirin, or up to 30 grams a day. Just to put it into perspective, we obviously, hopefully do not go over 4 grams a day today. So therefore, many actually medical historians believe that aspirin poisoning, whose symptoms include both hyperventilation and pulmonary edema, difficult to discern from the inflammatory responses caused by the virus, that aspirin actually contributed, either caused or accelerated death from the Spanish flu in and of itself. Today, similarly, at the onset of this, we had no known treatments for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. We have tried multiple drugs, and that's a separate lecture. But suffice it to say that only time will tell which of the medications that we tried actually benefited, and that remains to be seen. Next slide. I do want to mention New York City separately because it stands out in both of these epidemics. New York City got hit early in both 1918 and 2020. In 1918, the reason it got hit early because the port, New York was the main port of embarkation and arrival of soldiers, both of soldiers during World War I. So that aided to New York being hit early. In 2020, in this interconnected world that we live in, we know that the heaviest traffic of most flights that come from Europe, proportionately more of them land at JFK and LaGuardia than in other parts of the US. And therefore we got hit very early. New York City reacted early in both of these pandemics with mandatory quarantines and closures. And back in 1918, actually, it's interesting that New York happened to be better prepared than most other US cities for dealing with a pandemic of the sort that hit us, having already been through a 20-year campaign against tuberculosis. So therefore, they already had put measures into place to improve sanitary conditions of the world, of the city. They had tenement house reform laws already in place that mandated the adequate ventilation in these apartments. And they had also been working diligently on cleaning the city and improving the sanitary conditions of the city with the aim of decreasing the TB pandemic, and that also worked for H1N1. Therefore, New York City at the time had the lowest death rate of all of the cities on the quote eastern seaboard, that is compared to Boston and cities in other cities on the east coast. I just quoted one of the studies that has compared fatality rates, timing, and public health interventions, finding that the death rates were about 50% lower in cities that implemented preventive measures early on compared with those that did not or did so late at a later stage. What about New York City schools? It's interesting that throughout the country, schools were actually closed. New York City was one of only 3 cities other than New Haven and Chicago that actually kept the schools open. And the reason was, it was quite controversial at the time, but the reasoning was that schools were better equipped than families and homes to keep children and young adults healthy. Second, they used, quote, to use Health Commissioner Copeland's wording, he, quote, schools were used as an educational propaganda can be kept consistently before them. In other words, schools and students were kind of used to disseminate information as it related to H1N1, what to do, what not to do, and what to avoid. And it was an incredible amount of pamphlets and printed material that was actually disseminated by students. It was also noted that schools were used as a health and medical surveillance program, similar to what we do today, but in a different way. We don't use the schools and students, but more tracking with electronic devices. So today we do not need to use school in this matter, so they were closed. We were utilizing remote learning, as most of you know. And in order to deliver what they called propaganda in the old days, we actually use our multimedia services and technology. I'm going to touch on mortality for both of these pandemics because obviously the mortality back in 1918, that pandemic killed more than, or anywhere from 50 to 100 million people worldwide, compared to the World War I killing 16 million people. So it was a huge, had a huge effect on mortality. I'm going to start off by mentioning the association with age. Back in 1918, if you look at the left side of this slide, you can see that the 1911, 1917 mortality curve was U-shaped. In other words, it affected, so on the y-axis you have the death rates, on the x-axis you have age, and as you can see, the usual normal, I should say, normal flu seasons or pneumonia season killed the children, young children, and hit hard on the older individuals. However, in the solid line that you see, that's the mortality rate for the H1N1 pandemic. And as you can see, it's not U-shaped, it's W-shaped. In other words, there's an added mortality rate affecting younger individuals between the ages of 20 and 40, likely due to the fact that the World War I, actually, those were the soldiers, the young people that were participated in battle. But the crowded military facilities, again, were hit pretty hard with the influenza, not just the war. On the right-hand side, you'll see the association between COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 and age. There's a little bit of a different depiction of the data. Here you have the age groups on the y-axis and the percentage of death on x-axis. And as you can see, the older individuals, so 50 and over, particularly 85 and older, they accounted for most of the deaths of the COVID-19 pandemic as of yet. So not U-shaped, and it seemed to have spared younger people, which the H1N1 did not do. So moving on to these graphs, I know that you're all very familiar with these waves that we call, and we're always anticipating and planning for a second wave or a third wave. Back in 1918, these are mortality waves. These are not incidence waves, but mortality waves from the UK, noting that there were similar waves broadly applicable globally. So there was similar, this is just an example of it. What happened was they had a milder mortality wave in the beginning of June, and then the wave flattened, only to hit a lot harder with the second wave with much increased mortality rates a few or 4 months later. Again flattened with a third wave. So there were 3 waves that happened back then. These are from the WHO website, and as you can see, the mortality waves now for COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic still remains to be seen. If you look at the United States in the left upper hand corner, the curve has not flattened, it's still up there. These are not, again, incidence curves, these are mortality curves. And while in some countries, the mortality curves are in alignment with the incidence curves, that is not the fact everywhere. So in fact, I want to point out again the numbers of deaths in the Americas depicted in yellow. It is still flat. We are still in the first curve, in the first wave. We have not gotten out of it yet as a country or anywhere in the world, with the exception of Europe maybe. They flattened it somewhat, but time will tell. We are still not out of this. This is an interesting analysis. It was published in JAMA mid-August. What you're seeing is death rates during the peak of the 2 pandemics. Now, the peak of the 1918 pandemic occurred in October and November of 1918, whereas the peak of the current pandemic happened in March and April. And I want to add that these are data from New York, so New Yorkers, and it's depicting the all-cause deaths per 100,000 person weeks from the 1918 peak, or the 61 days of the pandemic then, compared with the 61 days of the peak pandemic this year. And obviously, if you look at the left side of the left-handed bars, you can see that from the years 1914 through 1917, the all-cause mortality death rates were pretty flat, around 100 per 100,000, and then rose up to 280, somewhere around 280 during the pandemic of 1918. Now look at what happened this year during COVID or during the SARS-CoV-2 infection. Again, in New York, the mortality rates were stable, 2017, 18, and 19. And then this year, again, this is only during those 61 days during the peak, it rose up to 200 per 100,000 deaths a week. And I want to point your attention to the difference between the baseline to the pandemic deaths in 1918, 100 to 280, as compared with 2020, where the difference goes from 50 to 200. So it's 180 versus 150. So despite the better sanitary conditions that we have today, less crowding, all of the medical technology, and not just medical technology, but technology in general, but specifically the technology that we have to manage acute care, intensive care units, all of the medical and expertise that we have mechanical ventilation. We have antibiotics to treat superinfections for bacterial superinfections on viral diseases. We have supplemental oxygen. We even have vaccines. Despite all of these medical and non-medical advances, the difference in mortality between the 2 pandemics is actually unimpressive. And taking this a step further in analyzing this, which we can say that if we did not have all of these modern measures to help us out in managing patients, SARS-CoV-2 infection may have comparable or actually even greater mortality rates than H1N1 did in 1918. And that's a scary thought. On a brighter note, I do want to end up by saying that influenza has been difficult. As you are all aware, we need a different influenza vaccine every year. We have not yet been able to come up with a pan-influenza virus vaccine. And that is because the virus itself, the genome, makes a lot of replication cycles and multiple uncorrected errors in these cycles. And the numbers don't really matter, but just enough that every year there are smaller changes in the viral genome, what we call antigenic drifts, or even bigger changes with antigenic shifts, resulting in different variants of the influenza virus coming up and popping up every year, and even with new variants coming up like it did in 1918. So that's a problem in terms of both the vaccines and also new variants coming up. The coronavirus, on the other hand, or SARS-CoV-2 specifically, appears to have lower mutation rates, making it a much more genetically stable virus. And this relative genetic stability of SARS-CoV-2 means that if we get future peaks, remember we're still in the initial wave, that if there are any future peaks of disease, it is unlikely to be driven by a natural change in the virulence due to mutation, but more likely to be due to other situations, possibly situations that we can potentially have control over, like masks and social distancing and all of the measures that we have already taken. Also, it may play a role in giving us a durable vaccine. It remains to be seen. We don't know that yet. Currently, there are more than 25 vaccine candidates out there, of which 5 have entered phase 3 trials. And we are all banking on that to happen, to be not just an immunogenic vaccine, but also to be a vaccine that prevents further disease. But the fact that it is so more genetically stable, it's actually more promising than what we saw with this year-long battle with the flu vaccine. And in conclusion, I want to remind everyone, it's not just Mount Sinai Morningside or St. Luke's that has its anniversary today. Mount Sinai Morningside may be 175 years old, but the flu vaccine is 75 years old in 2020. So get vaccinated. And I sincerely hope that by the year 2095, we can look back and say that the COVID vaccine is hitting its 75th anniversary. And I'm going to end at that to give at least 5 minutes for questions.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. Kujik. This is really fascinating. So I have a couple here in the Q&A box. If anyone else has questions, feel free to put them in our chat and I'll bring those up after I get to these. So someone wants to know what your thoughts are on the schools being open right now and if you think they should be open, and just like a little more comparison to the 1918 when they kept those open.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to generalize. I think in some areas, more restrictions are necessary than in other areas. And I think that's what we're dealing with. That's why the tracing of the COVID, SARS-CoV-19 is so important, so that we can pick up on these areas that are increasing in prevalence. And those areas we need to act early and close down early in order to prevent further spread. In areas where we've really flattened the curve, I think it's safe to say moderate openings of closing is advisable. And I think New York State is doing great in this area.
Great, thank you. So the next question I have here, was masking compliance less of a problem in 1918?
It was certainly, as it's interesting to read these historical recounts, it was definitely as political as it is now. The words restricting my freedom did come up then as it has now. It became a political issue as much then as it did now. So very little has changed in terms of masking. But people were more trusting of, I think, the healthcare professional. I think they were more trusting in the sense in 1918, they were more likely to wear them in general than they are now. I think the expectation today is we just want this to go over and go back to normal life. And I think that was not so much, as far as I can tell, in 1918, that was not as much the mantra in the society.
Sure. I'm sure media has a lot to do with that now too. Just we expect things a lot now, so. So Ron Powers just made a comment that you answered many of his questions, but he often wonders how much differently the pandemic was handled 100 years ago. So I think you answered a lot of the questions we had. I hope you do go through the chat because you have a lot of wonderful compliments in there.
Oh, thank you.
That, and,
I have to say it was amazing. It was an eye-opener to me to realize that we already had all of these measures in place in 1918, and yet we always feel like we need to reinvent the wheel. Honestly, I don't think we learned that much, or maybe it was all just forgotten.
Sure. All right, thank you so much again. If anyone else has a question, you can drop it in the chat. We'll bring it up later. And we're going to turn it back over to Meredith.
Thank you, everyone.
I would like us to all join in a closing prayer, a benediction on this gathering and our mission as a hospital. And I will explain what the poltergeists next to me are later. Please join me. O God, our creator and sustainer, O divine, however we imagine and embrace you, help us to stay true to our values. Help us to stay patient under the weight of uncertainties such as now prevail. And help us to feel your reassuring love when we are overcome by doubt. Then, may we reflect these values and your reassuring love to our patients, and in so doing, fulfill our mission as healers. From this day and over the next 174 years, may all who follow us find and offer new strength in service to you. Amen. Now, that ain't all, folks. We are taking a moment now at the end in the glow of this marvelous program to get around to something, Norma Braun, that has been on the back burner for almost a year now, and we simply must get it completed. A year ago around this time, you were selected to become the first recipient of our Spirit of Compassion Award. And so, given the interruptions of your schedule, the holidays, and then COVID, we now bring this award to you by special courier. With love, devotion, and a great deal of pleasure that we did surprise you.
Yeah, you did. Totally. Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Really, it wasn't necessary. It's so many more
well earned. Well earned by a lifetime of commitment to your patients, to the inventive and assiduous and beautiful work that you did, and by your compassion for patients, colleagues, friends, all of whom are grateful to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm very deeply.
Are you going to show us?
Well, if I can. I'm supposed to have video here. If Audrey can.
Perhaps not in high resolution, but that is the idea.
Maybe I'll take it out. Maybe you can see it better when it's out. It's a beautiful glass commemoration. It's very kind, generous.
Well, as we have said,
Thank you.
well deserved and given with love. Now, there are a number of people who want to amplify. Yes, we can see it and see it well.
Well, maybe I have to turn it around so it's not backwards, huh?
No, now it's backwards.
Oh. Sorry.
Now it's perfect.
Well, I want to remind everyone that I'm still raising funds to restore the rest of the chapel. It still needs a lot of repairs. The paintings need to be refurbished. There's several other things. The Book of Four Evangelicals.
Yes.
So, and the organ, we'd like to have it functioning again. I've been asked by several people across the country to strip our organ for parts because they need them for the Squire organ, which is a very famous organ from around 1920s, which is around the end of the flu pandemic. At any rate, I've said no, because I'd like to get it back into action. It's an incredibly beautiful organ, has a wonderful sound, but it needs to be updated and upgraded and tuned. So I'm aiming for $1 million. Anybody wants to give me from a penny on up, we accept everything. Thank you.
You truly are indefatigable. Just.
Well, I think it's part of our wonderful legacy, and music certainly is a wonderful part of healing. And I'm a big, strong believer in very non-toxic methods of helping healing. So that is the touch, the kindness, the appropriate choice of therapy, music, and warmth, and respect, and love. Those are all healing elements that go far to help all our patients, our colleagues, especially in times of stress, such as COVID has put on all of us. But thank you.
And you, Norma and Carl, are a dear treasure in our legacy. So, thank you. Audrey?
So Norma, we have a few people who want to send you a little message. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Well, my goodness gracious. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your.
The Spirit of Compassion Award for Dr. Norma Braun. Well, I'm not surprised, not one bit. Hey, Dr. Braun, this is Maxine. I just got the email and I got the good news that you're getting this awesome award, and I'm not surprised. In the time that I've known you, this is exactly who you are, and you've taught me so much. Thank you for your dedication. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your tenacity. Thank you for your compassion. You are so committed to the patient experience. You're so committed to Morningside, and you're so committed to sustaining the history of this organization. And for that, I just say thank you, and I have such a enormous degree of respect for what you do and for what you've done. So congratulations on this awesome award. I'm privileged to be a witness to it, and thank you again.
Dr. Braun, congratulations on this much-deserved award. You are not only great in your compassion, but unapologetically bold in it. It's one of the delights of my day when we have occasion to catch up, as you fill me in on the many ways you love this hospital and this work, the work of caring. I look forward to many more chats and laughs and lessons. Congrats again.
Dr. Norma Braun is the 2000 2019 Spirit of Compassion Award winner. Wow, we got it right this time. Hi, Norma, how are you? I want to just say a little bit about myself, but that's just to qualify everything that I want to say about Norma, because trust me, this is all about Norma. This is my second career as a chaplain. My first career was a soldier. I did 25 years in the Army as an attack pilot, and in my first career, I really learned to appreciate healthcare workers. But in my first career, healthcare workers supported me. Now, in this, my second career as a chaplain, I support healthcare workers. And I've really gotten to learn a lot about the medical profession. And there are two types of medical professionals. There's healthcare providers, medical professionals, which I have the highest regard for, people who just are on tops of their craft and incredibly brilliant, uncanny memory. But then there's another level on top of that, and I call those people healers. Dr. Norma Braun is a healer. That is someone who just puts it all together and understands everything that's needed and brings it every time. One of the very first people that Meredith told me I had to meet was Dr. Norma Braun, and my first memory of her was going through the old library over there at what used to be St. Luke's. And if you didn't have the luxury, the privilege of having her give you a tour to the library, you missed something amazing. All my conversations with Norma, I get frustrated because I just can't remember everything that she says. And for almost 2 years, Norma's office was above mine, so I really had an honor of speaking to her like twice a day most of the time, and really just every single time I walked away from a conversation with Norma, I was so much smarter than I was when I walked into it. The compassion you bring, the expertise that you bring, the knowledge, the energy that you bring is second to none. I am so much better of a chaplain because of you. I and we all thank you for everything that you do for healthcare, for chaplaincy, for everything that you do. Thank you, congratulations, and God bless you.
Hi, Dr. Braun. It's Deb Travis. I just wanted to join in the celebration of you. You are such an exceptional woman, and you're so inspiring and wonderful, and you've done so much for this institution, which I love, and you have helped us all to understand more about it. I love how you are. I love how you continue to practice medicine and continue to bring your spirit around with you everywhere you go, which I guess is inevitable. And you're like a model citizen, and you bring joy. And that's, what more can anybody ask for another person to do? So congratulations on being appropriately celebrated, because you totally deserve it, as does your wonderful husband deserve you. Thank you and congratulations.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Vizina. I'm the Chief Nursing Officer here at Mount Sinai Morningside, and I'd like to spend some time sharing my tribute to Dr. Norma Braun. When I came to Morningside in 2014, Art Gianelli shared with me there's two people you absolutely must meet on your agenda, number one, and that was Doctors Carl and Norma Braun. And he was just so right in making that a priority for me when I came. And then, of course, I appointed both of them to the Patient Experience Operations Council. But putting that aside, I need to share my experience with Norma in that her incredible advocacy for our patients, both inpatient. I know that she was very, very involved with 10 East, sharing with me some of the heartfelt stories that patients would share with her in her own practice, and of course in the legacy that she has provided for Mount Sinai Morningside. Norma has really been the number one person that you would think of when you have any questions about our past and where we came from, and that is just so important in how it makes up who we are today. So I just want to share Dr. Braun, Norma, as my friend, as my colleague, as a professional role model.
Thank you for all you do. You've made our chapel beautiful once again. You always share with me any information that will help me do my job better and help us be better here at Morningside. And for all the contributions over the years, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you. And this is my tribute to Dr. Norma Braun.
Congratulations, Dr. Norma Braun, for receiving the Spirit of Compassion Award. I can honestly think of no one who deserves it better. The dedication that you show to your patients, to your hospital, it all comes from a deep sense of compassion and your big heart. Once again, congratulations.
Norma, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to congratulate you on winning the Spirit of Compassion Award. The reality, you had no competition because you're the embodiment of compassion here at Mount Sinai Morningside. You're the link to our history, you're the cheerleader for our staff, and you're the advocate for our patients. We are all better because of your presence here at Mount Sinai Morningside. I am certainly a better leader because of your presence here. And our patients are so much better off because of your tireless work on their behalf and your willingness to go the extra mile for them in any and all instances. No problem, no challenge is too small for you to take on behalf of our patients. And you know what? That matters to them, and that matters to me, and that matters to everybody here at Mount Sinai Morningside. So there's no better day for this award to be bestowed upon you than Founders Day, and there's no better person to win this award than you, Dr. Norma Braun. Congratulations.
Good afternoon, Dr. Braun. It's your Finzi Respiratory here wishing you congratulations on your Spirit of Compassion Award. Absolutely well deserved. We know that you're a caring individual who's educated us, who helped nurture our department. You help us out whenever we need. That's why we're always willing to be there for you. So again, we just want to say thank you.
Congratulations, Dr. Braun. Congratulations, Dr. Braun. You're an angel for us and for the patient.
Congratulations.
Enough. First of all, it's a privilege to be here, to be able to do what I love to do. It nourishes my soul. And I thank you all because I count on you to help us help our patients. And that's what we're here for. And that's why we want to go in the rest of the 21st century being even better than we were in the past. And we can continue the legacy of the common good is what Dr. Muhlenberg worked so hard to strive for. And I think that we can do it. We've got the people, we've got the leadership, we've got the energy. The only thing we need is more money, but everybody needs more money. But anyway, we're working on that too. But thank you all. A wonderful way to end this is a total surprise. Thank you.
A blessing on you, Norma and Carl, and thank you.
So that concludes our program for the day. Thank you all for coming.